Good morning. Let's get started on another day of making glass. As you remember from the last video, we had taken a piece out of the kiln, we put it on the table, and we kind of looked at it. We talked about some things, about the type of glass we used, the colors of it, the reactions that were happening, and that type of stuff. So it's a couple days later now. This has been sitting in the CLR for about 48 hours, actually, about 2 days. The CLR is this stuff here. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it works quite well. I do not dilute it at all. I just pour it in straight, enough to cover the whole piece. And then I have it in this pan that actually I bought from a feed store. It's used for feeding horses and stuff like that. But it works great. It's a nice size, and I use it for my big pieces to soak the pieces in CLR. Usually I use a smaller tray because my pieces are usually cut first, and then I usually put them in the CLR. But for this piece, I went ahead and filled this in. After I get that piece out of there, we'll use this pan for my cold work. So I'll put water in it, about 2 inches of water or so in this, and then you'll see later on that I use it for cold working. So let's go ahead and take the plastic off. I use the plastic on it just to keep the liquid from evaporating, and that way it extends the life of your liquid and works quite well. So we'll lift the piece up, and the kiln wash comes right off. It does. It's just a really nice wash on it. So I wipe it completely off. And that's it. And we'll take it over the table, and then we'll look at it and decide what types of things we want to cut. Okay, we have the piece brought back onto the table, and we're going to take a look at where we want to start cutting that piece. First, what I do is usually wipe down the piece because it still has some CLR residue on it. So we'll use some glass cleaner. And then I'll start looking at it to see what I like best about it. I'll turn it around, sometimes I'll put it in the light. It looks nice that way too. So we'll look at that. I like what's going on here. Some of this stuff here is pretty cool, especially that. Some of the reactions are going good. So what I have is I've cut out some pieces, mats, I guess you could call them, and I start putting them on here to see if there's something that I like, or something that, you know, that reflects what it is that I wanted to say. Now, with my sketchbook, I sketched out kind of what I was looking for, and that's not too bad there. I'll turn it back around and see what we have. Kind of like this area right here is kind of doing something for me. Sometimes I'll take a piece like this, lay it down, and the reason I lay these pieces down is so I can frame in the piece and kind of see what it looks like. I kind of like it further over here. Get some of that dark, some of that blue going on there. Try to go as far as I can with it. And sometimes I'll get up and look at it. We got some light coming in now. Let's put that light on, see if that helps us. So I have this rectangle. I have a couple squares. Sometimes I like the squares. That's kind of nice. Kind of like that blue and that blue. Maybe try to get rid of that blue. See what that does. You know, like what's going on there. So we may try something like that. I kind of like what's happening there. And then what I'll do is mark it, because we will be cutting it. And I just use a Sharpie to do that. And what I'll do is I'll lay my piece up here, or my straight edge, and I'll draw a line here. It's just a guideline, so when I cut, I'm fairly in the ballpark. I want to come as close to that blue as that I can, because I don't. So that'd probably be one cut there. But, you know, let's go ahead and try that. We got that piece there. Okay, we'll draw that one out. So we'll get two big pieces out of that. Anyway, that's the idea. Okay, we'll go ahead and get it set up to cut. I have an MK saw with a diamond blade, and I have it on the MK stand. The only thing different that I did that the MK stand does not come with are wheels. So I put locking wheels on it, and you can just buy those at Home Depot. So things that you need, I always wear a plastic apron just to keep the water off my clothes. Definitely you need some safety glasses. And then I always use a mask, because that water that comes off of there is cutting that glass, which amounts to powder, so I don't want to breathe in that powder. Okay, I have the MK saw set up. I have water over here. It's plugged into electricity, and we're just about ready to get started. One thing I do before I cut is use a dressing block, and that dresses that blade up so it cuts a lot better. Like I said, it's an MK saw. I've had this thing, actually we've had it for about 10 years. It works great. We use it a lot. It's probably one of the best tools you can get for your code working studio right off. The first thing you really need to buy is an MK saw. You can do your other code working, most of it by hand, and that's what I do. But the MK saw is invaluable. You can do a lot of different things with it. So if you're looking for a tool, you're just starting out, setting up your shop, go ahead and get an MK saw. They last forever, and they're definitely a great investment. The other thing I have for my MK saw are some stabilizers. There are these things right here, and I have them on both sides of the blade. They're made by Forrest, F-O-R-R-E-S-T. You can get them from Amazon. Just type in Forrest, and then look for the size of your armature. That'll give you the size of the hole that's cut in these. These stabilize that blade. If you have a glass cutting blade, you'll know that most of them are very thin, and so definitely that added bit really stabilizes that blade. They're not very expensive, and they're well worth getting. I'm going to go ahead and get the glass. We'll bring it out here, and we'll start cutting. Let me get one more piece of equipment. I use a square. That way I can line up my line that I marked. Always make sure when you start it that the water starts coming out before you start cutting. Otherwise, you could possibly crack the piece because that blade gets pretty hot without the water. Okay, that edge is cut. I'll lay this piece aside. Now we have one piece that's squared off. And generally what I do, because I want things to stay square, so just keep that squared. This straight edge here then goes against this straight edge on the table. And then we go ahead and cut. Right. Well, that's finished cutting. So now we'll go cold work it. Okay, we're ready to cold work. And as you can see, this area here is not very large, but I do all the cold working I need to do within this area. The saw I have parked over here, and I have this tub that I use with water in it. And I have a bucket over there with water in it. I have two Rubbermaid carts, and they work great. I can store my pads up there, miscellaneous supplies up there. Has a bottom shelf. You can put some stuff under the bottom shelf. And I got this mat over at Home Depot, and I got a piece of glass here that I use for hand lapping. And so I can hand lap over here. I can cold work my edges down over here, and I can saw, and if I have to grind the edges, I can replace that saw blade with a flat grinder, and I can grind my edges with that, especially if they're rounded. So that's what I have set up. I usually start by getting the edges done, and I use an old pad for that that's already wore out. And you can see it's not a big radius, but just enough to get that corner off. And then when I get the radius done, I'll do the edge with the old pad as well. I'll flip it over and then do the back side. I just want to get the rough edges off so it doesn't ruin my good pads. That's why I use the old pads for that. Once that's all done, then I'll take my good pad, and this is a grit of 80. And I'll do the edges as well with the 80. And then I'll feel the edge with my finger, and I feel a little rough spot right here, so I usually try to take everything down with the 80 grit pad initially. That's what I'm looking for, are the saw marks. To make sure that that's completely done. And then I'll use a yellow pad. And I'll go over it and smooth everything down again. Let's check these. I guess I'll use the red pad initially. And I'll keep doing that until everything is really smooth when I feel it. My last pad, this is the 800. I'll go over it and then I'll go over the edges, the corners as well, to kind of bevel those, smooth those corners out on the top. Sometimes I'll go over the top edge again just because I want a nice bevel, a nice clean bevel on the edges. Then I use my last pad to go over it. And it's nice and smooth and it feels really nice on the hand. So that's what I like to do when I cold work. I have two pieces here I need to cold work. That will probably take me about an hour, about 30 minutes each to do these two pieces. And then when that's done, we'll get back over to where we do the slumping and I'll show you how we slump.